At 10 that night, I saw my daughter on her knees, eating leftovers from the floor and cleaning it with her bare hands, her eyes full of tears. In the dining room, I heard her husband and his family laughing loudly. I lifted her up, marched to their table, and said the 5 words they would never forget. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I never thought I'd see my own daughter eating scraps off the floor like an animal. But there she was, my 32-year-old Fallon, 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild, on her hands and knees in that cold kitchen, picking up pieces of food that had been deliberately scattered across the tiles. The image is burned into my memory forever. Her swollen belly making it difficult for her to reach the corners, her beautiful auburn hair falling into her face as she tried to clean up what looked like the remnants of a family dinner. Her hands were shaking, and I could see the tears dropping onto the linoleum floor, mixing with the crumbs and sauce stains. I had come by unannounced that Thursday evening, something I rarely did since Fallon married Roman 3 years ago. Call it mother's intuition, but something had been eating at me for weeks. My daughter's voice on our weekly phone calls had become different, distant, strained, like she was speaking through glass. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd always say the same thing. "Everything's fine, Mom. Roman takes good care of me." But standing there in the doorway, watching my pregnant daughter crawl around that kitchen floor while Roman's family sat in the dining room laughing loudly, I knew nothing was fine. Nothing had been fine for a very long time. "Fallon!" I gasped, rushing toward her. She looked up at me with those same green eyes I'd been looking into for 32 years, but now they were filled with a shame so deep it made my chest ache. "Mom," she whispered, trying to stand up quickly. "I didn't know you were coming. What are you doing?" I reached for her arms, helping her to her feet. "Why are you on the floor?" Before she could answer, Roman appeared in the kitchen doorway. At 35, he was a tall man with dark hair and a smile that had once charmed me completely. When Fallon first brought him home 4 years ago, I thought she'd found her prince. He was polite, well-dressed, spoke about wanting to take care of my daughter forever. But the man standing before me now had something cold in his eyes, something that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Carol," he said, and I noticed how he didn't call me Mom anymore, the way he used to. "We weren't expecting you. What's going on here?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "Why is my daughter cleaning food off the floor?" Roman's jaw tightened slightly. "Fallon had a little accident during dinner. She knocked over her plate." I looked at Fallon, whose face had gone pale. "Is that true, honey?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, glancing nervously at Roman. Yes, I was clumsy. But I'd raised this girl. I knew when she was lying, and she was lying now. The way her shoulders hunched, the way she couldn't meet my eyes, the way her voice shook. These were the same tells she'd had since she was 5 years old. "Well, accidents happen," I said carefully. "Let me help you clean this up." "That's not necessary," Roman cut in, his voice sharper now. "Fallon can handle it. She made the mess." Something in his tone made my blood run cold. This wasn't a husband speaking about his pregnant wife's accident. This was something else entirely. From the dining room, I could hear Roman's mother, Patricia, and his sister, Jennifer, still chatting and laughing. The contrast was jarring. My daughter on her knees in the kitchen while they enjoyed their evening as if nothing was happening just 20 feet away. "Fallon," I said firmly, "you shouldn't be on the floor in your condition. Let me get some paper towels." As I moved toward the counter, Roman stepped into my path. "Carol, I appreciate your concern, but this is our house. Fallon knows what she needs to do." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. Our house. Not their house, not the house they shared as husband and wife, but his house where she needed to know her place. I looked past him to Fallon, who was now standing against the sink, her hands protectively cradling her belly. The sight of her like that, defensive, scared, in her own home, made something fierce wake up inside me. "Fallon," I said, ignoring Roman completely, "why don't you come sit down? You look tired." "She's fine," Roman answered for her. "Aren't you, honey?" Fallon nodded quickly, too quickly. I'm fine, Mom. Really, but she wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. My daughter, who used to fill every room with her laughter, who used to stand up to bullies in high school, who used to argue with me about everything from politics to what to wear to church, was now standing in her own kitchen looking like a frightened animal. Maybe I should go, I said, though every instinct told me to stay, to plant myself between my daughter and whatever was happening here. That's probably best, Roman agreed, and I caught the satisfaction in his voice. Fallon needs her rest. As I gathered my purse, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There were muddy footprints on the kitchen floor, like someone had deliberately tracked dirt through the house. And there, in the corner near where Fallon had been kneeling, I saw what looked like the remains of an entire dinner plate. Not just spilled food, but broken ceramic scattered under the table. Fallon, I said quietly, trying one more time. Call me tomorrow? She glanced at Roman before nodding. Sure, Mom. But as I walked to my car, I knew she wouldn't call. And for the first time since my husband died 2 years ago, I felt completely helpless. Whatever was happening in that house, whatever hold Roman had over my daughter, it was stronger than anything I understood. Driving home through the darkened suburbs, I couldn't shake the image of Fallon on that kitchen floor. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, and I realized I was crying without even knowing when it had started. I had lost my husband to cancer. I couldn't lose my daughter to whatever this was, but as I pulled into my empty driveway, I had no idea how to fight an enemy I couldn't even name. Something was terribly wrong in my daughter's marriage, and tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly what that something was. Fallon didn't call the next day, or the day after that. By Sunday, I was sitting in my kitchen staring at my phone, my coffee growing cold as I wrestled with a decision that felt impossible. Should I call her? Should I drive over there? Or should I respect what Roman had clearly established as boundaries around my daughter's life? The answer came Tuesday afternoon when I was grocery shopping at the market where Fallon and I used to go together every week before she married Roman. I was reaching for apples when I heard a familiar laugh from the next aisle. My heart lifted, thinking it might be Fallon, but when I turned the corner, I saw Patricia, Roman's mother, chatting with another woman I didn't recognize. She's always been dramatic, Patricia was saying. Roman tries so hard to help her, but she just doesn't listen. Some women just aren't meant to be wives, you know? They need constant guidance. I froze behind a display of oranges, realizing they were talking about my daughter. It must be difficult for Roman, the other woman responded sympathetically. Dealing with someone so challenging, Patricia sighed dramatically. He's a saint, really. Putting up with her moods, her clumsiness, and now with the baby coming, she's gotten even worse. Last week she threw a complete tantrum because he asked her to clean up after herself. Can you imagine? My hands clenched around my shopping cart handle. A tantrum? Fallon had never thrown a tantrum in her life, not even as a toddler. She was the most level-headed person I knew, methodical and careful about everything she did. Well, the other woman said, at least Roman has family support. That makes all the difference. Oh yes, Patricia continued. We do our best to help him manage the situation. His sister Jennifer and I try to show Fallon how things should be done, but she's so resistant to learning. Just last Thursday, she made such a mess during dinner that Roman had to have her clean it up herself. Character building, you understand. Character building. The words hit me like ice water. They were talking about the scene I'd witnessed, but their version was completely different. In their telling, Fallon was the problem, the difficult wife who needed to be managed and taught lessons. I stayed hidden behind the oranges until they moved away, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about one bad evening. This was a pattern. A system where Roman and his family had positioned themselves as the reasonable ones dealing with my supposedly problematic daughter. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Fallon's neighborhood and parked across the street from her house, just watching. I felt like a stalker, sitting there in my car, but I needed to understand what was happening in my daughter's life. Around 4 o'clock, Roman's car pulled into the driveway. I slumped down in my seat as he got out, talking loudly on his phone. Even from 50 yards away, I could hear his voice, sharp and irritated. Told you the payment would be late. My wife doesn't understand money management. I'm working on it. Wife doesn't understand money management? Fallon had a business degree. She'd managed her own finances perfectly well before marriage, even helping me set up my retirement accounts after her father died. 20 minutes later, I watched as Fallon came outside to get the mail. She moved slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, the other protectively over her belly. But what struck me wasn't her pregnancy waddle. It was how she looked around nervously before walking to the mailbox, as if she was afraid someone might see her. When she got back to the front door, she struggled with the lock for a moment. As the door finally opened, I heard Roman's voice boom from inside the house. "Where were you? I told you to start dinner an hour ago. I was just getting the mail." Fallon's voice was so quiet I could barely hear her from across the street. "The mail can wait. Do you see what time it is?" The door slammed shut, cutting off whatever came next. I sat in my car for another hour, my heart breaking a little more with each passing minute. This wasn't the marriage I'd watched my daughter build. This wasn't the man who used to bring her flowers and tell her she was the smartest woman he'd ever met. When I finally drove home, I made a decision. I was going to find out exactly what had changed in Roman's life, and more importantly, what he was doing to my daughter behind closed doors. The next morning, I called Fallon's best friend Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to since the wedding. Sarah had been Fallon's maid of honor, but I'd noticed she was never around anymore. "Mrs. Henderson." Sarah's voice was warm, but surprised. "How are you? I'm worried about Fallon," I said directly. "When's the last time you talked to her?" There was a long pause. "It's been a while, maybe 6 months." 6 months? Fallon and Sarah had been inseparable since college. "What happened?" Another pause. Roman thought. He felt that Fallon needed to focus on her marriage and the baby. He said having too many outside influences wasn't healthy for her right now. Outside influences. My daughter's best friend was now an outside influence. "Sarah," I said carefully, "do you think everything is okay with Fallon?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know. The last time I saw her, she seemed different, quieter. She kept checking her phone like she was worried about something. And when Roman came to pick her up early from lunch, she left immediately. Didn't even finish her sentence. Has she tried to contact you since then?" "A few times, but the calls always seem to get cut short. She'll say she has to go suddenly, or that Roman needs her for something. I stopped trying because I felt like I was causing problems for her somehow." After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the family photos on my mantle. There was one from Fallon's college graduation, her arm around Sarah, both of them grinning at the camera. Another from her wedding day, where she looked radiant, but I now noticed something I'd missed before. Roman's hand on her back, positioned in a way that looked controlling rather than supportive. The pattern was becoming clearer. Roman had systematically isolated Fallon from her support system. Her friends, and now it seemed even her own mother, was being pushed to the margins of her life. That evening, I made another decision. I was going to learn everything I could about Roman Castellano. If he was hiding something, I was going to find it. And if he was hurting my daughter, I was going to stop him. I spent the next 2 hours at my computer, searching social media, public records, anything I could find. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Roman's previous relationships, his employment history, his financial records, there were gaps everywhere, inconsistencies that didn't add up. But it was a small detail in an old newspaper article that made me realize just how deep this rabbit hole went. Roman hadn't told us the truth about his past, and if he was lying about who he was, what else was he lying about? My daughter was in more danger than I'd ever imagined, and tomorrow, I was going to start building the case that would save her life. The newspaper article I found was buried on page 6 of a local Phoenix newspaper from 8 years ago. It was a small piece about a domestic disturbance call, but what caught my eye was the name, Roman Anthony Castellano, 27, arrested for harassment and violation of a restraining order. The woman who filed the complaint was named Maria Elena Castellano, his wife, a wife he'd never mentioned to us. My hands shook as I printed the article and began a deeper search. What I found over the next 3 days made me sick to my stomach. Roman hadn't just been married before, he'd been married twice. Maria Elena was his second wife, and there was a Jessica Castellano before her. Both women had filed restraining orders against him. Both had children with him. I sat in my kitchen Thursday morning, surrounded by printed articles and records, trying to piece together the man my daughter had married. The Roman we knew was a successful marketing executive who traveled occasionally for work. The real Roman was a man who'd abandoned 2 families, defaulted on child support payments totaling over $37,000, and had a pattern of isolating and controlling his wives. The phone rang, startling me from my research. It was Fallon. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded hollow, exhausted. "Sweetheart, how are you feeling?" "I'm okay. The baby's moving a lot today." There was a pause. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise you won't get upset." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "Roman thinks. He feels like your visits might be stressing me out. With the pregnancy and everything. He's worried about my blood pressure." I gripped the phone tighter. "Fallon, I've visited you maybe 3 times in the past 2 months." "I know, but he thinks even that might be too much right now. He just wants what's best for the baby." "And what do you think?" Silence stretched between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I think I'm just tired all the time. Everything feels hard lately." "Honey, are you eating enough? Are you taking care of yourself?" "Roman makes sure I eat. He's very attentive about my meals." The way she said attentive made my skin crawl. "Fallon, do you remember when you were little and you used to tell me everything? Every thought, every worry, every exciting thing that happened at school? Mom, please don't. I miss that. I miss knowing what's really going on in your life." "Nothing's going on. I'm just pregnant and tired." But I could hear something else in her voice now. Fear. She was afraid to talk to me, afraid of what might happen if she said too much. "Fallon, if you ever need anything at all, you can call me. Day or night." "I know, Mom. I have to go now. Roman's coming home for lunch." The line went dead, and I stared at the phone in my hand. My daughter was scared in her own home, and the man she was scared of was the father of her unborn child. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator. Daniel Marcus was recommended by my lawyer, a quiet man in his 50s who specialized in domestic situations. When I showed him what I'd found about Roman, his expression grew increasingly grim. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, spreading the documents across his desk, "your son-in-law fits a very specific pattern. Men like this don't change. They just find new victims. Can you find his other families?" "I can try, but I need to warn you. What we might discover could be worse than what you already know. I need to know everything. My daughter's life might depend on it." Daniel's investigation took 2 weeks. When he called me back to his office, the file he placed in front of me was thick enough to be a book. The contents made me understand that Roman wasn't just a bad husband. He was a predator. Maria Elena Castellano, his second wife, had fled to a women's shelter with their twin daughters when they were 18 months old. She'd documented months of psychological abuse, financial control, and escalating threats. Roman had convinced her that she was mentally unstable, that she couldn't take care of their children properly, that she owed him everything because he'd saved her from her pathetic family. The parallels to Fallon's situation were terrifying. Jessica Castellano, his first wife, had been even younger when they married, just 21. Roman had isolated her from her family completely, moved her across the country, and convinced her that she was worthless without him. When she finally left, she'd been so broken down that it took her 3 years to rebuild her life. Both women mentioned the same pattern, Daniel explained. He would start with small criticisms, then escalate to public humiliation. He controlled their money, their social connections, their daily routines, and both women said he became particularly cruel during their pregnancies. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Pregnant women are more vulnerable, more dependent. Men like Roman see pregnancy as an opportunity to increase their control. The victims feel trapped. They have nowhere to go, no resources, and they're carrying his child." I thought about Fallon on that kitchen floor, 7 months pregnant and cleaning up food with her bare hands while Roman's family laughed in the next room. The timing wasn't coincidental. "There's something else," Daniel continued, pulling out another set of documents. "Roman's been accessing your daughter's bank accounts. Over the past year, he's moved approximately $43,000 from her savings into accounts she's not aware of." "What accounts?" "Investment accounts in his name only. He's also taken out a line of credit against their house without her knowledge." I felt dizzy. "Is that legal?" "If she signed the paperwork, yes. But based on the pattern we're seeing, I doubt she understood what she was signing." The room seemed to spin around me. Roman wasn't just emotionally abusing my daughter. He was stealing from her, positioning himself to take everything she had while she was too broken down to fight back. "Mr. Marcus?" I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "What would you do if this was your daughter?" He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "I'd get her away from him, but I'd do it very carefully. Men like Roman don't let go easily, and they become most dangerous when they feel their control slipping." That night, I sat in my living room with the investigation file spread across my coffee table, photos of bruises on Maria Elena's arms, medical records showing Jessica's stress-related health problems during her marriage, bank records showing how Roman had systematically drained both women's finances. And now he was doing it all again to my daughter. I picked up my phone and called Fallon. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. The third time I called, Roman answered. "Carol, it's late. Fallon's sleeping. I need to talk to her. She needs her rest. The doctor says stress isn't good for the baby. Roman, I know about Phoenix." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and controlled. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're making a mistake interfering in my marriage." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've made this mistake twice before." I heard him take a sharp breath. "Stay away from my family, Carol. I'm warning you." "Or what?" "Or you'll lose your daughter forever. And believe me, I can make that happen." The line went dead, but his threat hung in the air like poison. He could make me lose Fallon forever, but the truth was, I was already losing her. The question now was whether I could save her before it was too late. Tomorrow, I was going to find out just how far Roman was willing to go to protect his secrets, and I was going to discover that the real horror wasn't what he'd done to his other wives. It was what he was planning to do to mine. The next morning brought a call that made my blood freeze. It was Fallon, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. "Mom, I need you to come. Please. Roman left for work and I found something. I was in my car within 5 minutes, my heart pounding as I drove through the morning traffic. When I arrived at Fallon's house, she opened the door before I could knock. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair disheveled, and she was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 3 days ago. "Honey, what happened?" She led me into the living room, her hands shaking as she pointed to a pile of papers scattered across the coffee table. "I was looking for our insurance information because I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and I found these hidden in Roman's desk." I picked up the first document and felt my stomach drop. It was a life insurance policy on Fallon, taken out 6 months ago for $500,000. Roman was the sole beneficiary. The second document was even worse, a will that Fallon had apparently signed, leaving everything to Roman in the event of her death. But I knew my daughter's signature, and this looked wrong somehow. "Fallon, do you remember signing this will?" She shook her head, wiping her nose with a tissue. "Roman said it was just routine paperwork for the baby, insurance forms and emergency medical documents. He said all pregnant women needed to update their information." "And you signed without reading?" "He said it was all standard language. Too complicated for me to understand anyway. He's always handled our finances because he says I'm not good with numbers." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, why would he take out life insurance on me without telling me?" I sat down beside her, my mind racing. This wasn't just financial abuse. This was something much darker. Roman was positioning himself to benefit from Fallon's death, and he'd manipulated her into signing away her rights without her knowledge. "Fallon, I need to tell you something about Roman's past. But first, I need you to promise me you'll listen with an open mind. Over the next hour, I showed her everything Daniel had found. The previous wives, the restraining orders, the abandoned children, the pattern of escalating abuse. With each document, I watched my daughter's face change from confusion to disbelief to horror. "This can't be right," she whispered, staring at a photo of Maria Elena's bruised arms. "Roman would never hurt anyone. He's particular about things. He wants everything to be perfect. Honey, look at what happened to you Thursday night. Is making you eat off the floor Roman being particular? Or is it something else?" Fallon's hand went to her throat unconsciously. "I was clumsy. I knocked over my plate because I'm so big and awkward now." "Fallon, you've never been clumsy a day in your life. You played violin for 15 years. You used to do calligraphy as a hobby. You don't just suddenly become clumsy." She stared at the documents spread across the table, her breathing becoming shallow. "He says the pregnancy has made me scattered, that I need more structure, more guidance. Is that what you believe?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she looked at me with eyes that seemed to see clearly for the first time in months. "Mom, I don't remember the last time I made a decision by myself. Roman chooses what I eat, what I wear, who I can talk to. He says it's because he loves me, because he wants to take care of me." "And how does that make you feel?" "Tired," she whispered. "So tired. Like I'm disappearing." That's when she told me about the bank accounts. "He moved me off all our joint accounts 3 months ago," she said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "He said it was temporary, just to protect our money while he was dealing with some work issues. He gives me an allowance for groceries and doctor visits, but I have to show him receipts for everything." "What about your own savings account?" "He said we needed to consolidate everything for tax purposes. I signed the paperwork to close it, but I thought the money was going into our joint account." She looked at me with dawning horror. "It didn't, did it?" I shook my head. "He's stolen $43,000 from you, Fallon. Your entire inheritance from your father." The sound she made was like an animal in pain. All those years her father had saved for her future, all the money he'd set aside so she'd have security, Roman had taken it all. "What am I going to do?" she sobbed. "I can't leave. I have nowhere to go, no money, and the baby's coming in 2 months. You're coming home with me, right now." "I can't. Roman will be furious. He'll say I'm being hysterical, that pregnancy hormones are making me irrational." "Fallon, listen to me." I took her hands in mine. "Roman's other wives both mentioned the same thing. He became most dangerous when they tried to leave. We need to be smart about this." Over the next 2 hours, we developed a plan. Fallon would pretend everything was normal while I gathered more evidence. Daniel Marcus was already tracing Roman's hidden assets, and we needed to document everything before making our move. "There's something else," I told her as we finished going through the documents. "I'm not just your mother in this fight. I'm also a witness to what he's doing to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when we expose Roman, it won't just be your word against his. It'll be documented evidence from a private investigator, testimony from his previous victims, and financial records that prove he's been stealing from you." Fallon wiped her eyes, and for the first time in months, I saw a spark of the strong woman I'd raised. "What do I need to do?" "First, we're going to slowly move your important documents out of the house. Birth certificate, social security card, medical records, anything you'll need. Second, you're going to start keeping a journal of everything Roman does and says. Every criticism, every restriction, every time he controls your behavior. And then we're going to wait for the right moment to show him exactly who he's been messing with." As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my husband's death. Purpose. Roman thought he was dealing with a lonely old woman who would eventually give up and go away. He had no idea that he'd just declared war on a mother whose daughter was in danger. That evening, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, asking him to research options for protecting Fallon's remaining assets. The second was to Daniel Marcus. "I need you to find out everything about Roman's current financial situation. I told him. If he's stealing from my daughter, I want to know where that money is going. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that if Roman is following the same pattern as before, he's not just planning to control Fallon forever. Men like him always have an exit strategy. I want to know what his is. What Daniel found over the next week would reveal that Roman's plan was more sinister than any of us had imagined. He wasn't just stealing Fallon's money, he was preparing to disappear with it, leaving her with nothing but debt and a newborn baby. But Roman had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the lengths a mother would go to protect her child, and by the time he realized his error, it would be far too late to save himself. The war for my daughter's life was just beginning, and I intended to win it. The moment of reckoning came on a cold Saturday evening in November, exactly 2 weeks before Fallon's due date. Daniel Marcus had called that morning with news that made my hands shake as I held the phone. "Mrs. Henderson, you need to see this immediately. Roman's planning to leave town." I met Daniel at his office within the hour. The evidence spread across his desk painted a picture so horrifying that I had to sit down to process it all. "He's been liquidating assets for the past month," Daniel explained, pointing to bank statements and transfer records. "The $43,000 from your daughter's account was just the beginning. He's also borrowed against their house, cashed in his retirement accounts, and taken out 3 credit cards in Fallon's name. How much total? Over $120,000. And here's the worst part. He's been in contact with someone named Elena Rodriguez in Miami. We traced the phone records. She's pregnant too, Mrs. Henderson, 7 months along." The room seemed to tilt around me. He's doing this to another woman? It appears he's been seeing her for almost a year. She thinks he's divorced. He's told her the same stories he told your daughter, that he's successful, stable, ready to start a family. I stared at the photographs Daniel had taken. Roman with a young Hispanic woman, his hand protectively over her swollen belly, the same pose I'd seen him strike with Fallon countless times. The same predatory smile, the same calculated charm. There's more. He's booked a flight to Miami for next Tuesday. One way. What about Fallon? What about the baby? Daniel's expression was grim. Based on the pattern with his previous wives, I believe he's planning to abandon them. But given the life insurance policy and the will he had her sign, I'm concerned it might be worse than abandonment. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Roman wasn't just planning to steal from my daughter and disappear. He was positioning himself to collect $500,000 if something happened to her during childbirth. We have to warn her. Today. Mrs. Henderson, there's something else. He's been researching home birth midwives, women who operate without hospital oversight, who don't always follow safety protocols. My blood went cold. He wants her to give birth at home? He's been telling Fallon that hospital births are dangerous, that she'd be safer at home with a midwife he's personally vetted. He's even convinced her to stop seeing her regular obstetrician. I felt sick. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place, creating a picture of calculated murder disguised as tragic childbirth complications. Roman would get his insurance money, his freedom, and a clean slate to start over with Elena in Miami. I'm going to Fallon's house right now. Mrs. Henderson, be careful. If Roman suspects you know about his plans, he might accelerate his timeline. I drove to Fallon's house with my heart pounding and Daniel's evidence folder on the passenger seat. When I arrived, I saw Roman's car in the driveway and almost lost my nerve. But the image of my daughter giving birth under the care of some unlicensed midwife while Roman waited for her to die gave me the strength I needed. Fallon answered the door, looking exhausted and pale. Her belly was enormous now, and she moved carefully, one hand supporting her back. "Mom, what are you doing here? Roman said you weren't supposed to visit anymore. Where is he?" "Upstairs packing. He has another business trip next week." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Actually, he's been traveling a lot lately. Sometimes I wonder what kind of marketing requires so much travel." "Fallon, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be shocking, but I need you to stay calm for the baby's sake." Over the next 20 minutes, I showed her everything. The evidence of Elena Rodriguez, the flight confirmation to Miami, the research about unlicensed midwives, the pattern of abandonment and financial theft that Roman had perfected with his previous wives. Fallon stared at the photographs of Roman with Elena, her face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and finally, a cold rage I'd never seen before. "He told me Elena was his cousin," she said quietly. "Said she was going through a difficult pregnancy and he was helping support her family. Fallon, you need to pack a bag right now. You're coming home with me tonight." "I can't. The baby could come any day now, and I don't have anywhere else lined up for the birth." "You're going to have this baby in a hospital, with real doctors, where you and the baby will be safe." That's when we heard footsteps on the stairs. Roman appeared in the living room doorway, and the moment he saw the papers spread across the coffee table, his entire demeanor changed. The charming mask he usually wore slipped away, replaced by something cold and predatory. "What's this?" His voice was deceptively calm. "The truth," I said, standing up to face him, "about Elena Rodriguez, about your flight to Miami, about your plans to steal my daughter's life insurance money." Roman's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "Fallon, your mother is having another one of her episodes. These are clearly fabricated documents." "Episodes?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it when someone discovers you're a bigamist and a potential murderer?" "Mom," Fallon said quietly, and I turned to see her holding the photograph of Roman with Elena. "This woman is definitely pregnant, and look at the date stamp. This was taken last week." Roman's composure cracked slightly. "Fallon, sweetheart, you know you can't trust your mother's judgment. She's been unstable since your father died." But Fallon was studying the flight confirmation now, her expression hardening with each detail she absorbed. "Your flight is for Tuesday morning, the day after my due date. It's a business trip. I told you about it." "No," Fallon said, standing up slowly, her hand protectively over her belly. "You told me you'd be here for the birth. You promised you wouldn't travel until after the baby came." Roman took a step toward her, and I instinctively moved between them. "Fallon, you're getting worked up over nothing. Think about the baby." "Don't you dare use my baby to manipulate me," Fallon said, and I heard steel in her voice that reminded me of the strong woman I'd raised. "I want you to explain why you have a one-way ticket to Miami. I want you to explain who Elena Rodriguez is and why you're touching her pregnant belly in this photograph." Roman's mask slipped completely then, his face twisted into something ugly and mean. "You really want the truth? Fine. Elena is everything you're not. She's grateful, supportive, and she doesn't question every decision I make. She appreciates what I do for her instead of constantly complaining like some ungrateful." He caught himself, but it was too late. Fallon had heard enough. "Get out," she said quietly. "This is my house. Get out." This time her voice carried through the entire house, strong and clear and absolutely final. Roman looked between us, calculating his options. Finally, he smiled that cold, predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "Fine, but understand this, Fallon. Without me, you have nothing. No money, no home, no way to take care of that baby. You'll come crawling back within a week, begging me to forgive you." "Never," Fallon said. "I would rather raise this baby in a cardboard box than spend another day with you." Roman's face darkened. "We'll see about that." He grabbed his suitcase from the stairs and headed toward the door, then turned back one last time. "By the way, sweetheart, check your credit report. You might be surprised what you find." The door slammed behind him, leaving Fallon and me alone in the sudden silence. Fallon sank down onto the couch, her hands trembling as she cradled her belly. "Mom," she whispered, "what have I done? He's right. I don't have anything. No job, no money, nowhere to go. You have me," I said, sitting down beside her. "And you have something Roman never had. People who actually love you. But the baby will be born healthy in a real hospital, surrounded by people who want nothing but the best for both of you." As we sat there together, I felt my daughter's strength returning, like a flower turning toward the sun after a long winter. Roman had underestimated the power of a mother's love, and he was about to learn exactly how much that mistake would cost him. But first, we had to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else, and I knew exactly how we were going to do it. 3 months later, I was holding my granddaughter Sophie in the nursery of my home, watching her tiny fingers wrap around mine while Fallon slept peacefully in the next room. It had been the longest 3 months of my life, but also the most rewarding. The first thing we'd done after Roman left was contact Elena Rodriguez in Miami. That phone call was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, telling a 7-month pregnant woman that the man she loved was a lie. But Elena deserved to know the truth, just as Fallon had. Elena's reaction was devastating but swift. She'd immediately gone to the police, who discovered that Roman had been using a false identity with her, complete with forged documents and fabricated employment records. When they arrested him at Miami International Airport with a suitcase full of stolen money and fake identification papers, Elena was there to identify him. The investigation that followed unraveled Roman's entire network of deception. He'd been running the same con on women across 3 states, always targeting successful, educated women who had something he could steal. The authorities found evidence of at least 7 other victims over the past 12 years. But what really sealed Roman's fate was something we never expected. Maria Elena Castellano, his second wife, had been building a case against him for years. When she learned about Fallon and Elena Rodriguez, she came forward with evidence that connected Roman to a series of fraudulent insurance claims and suspicious deaths. It turned out that Roman's first wife, Jessica, hadn't just left him. She'd nearly died during what was supposed to be a routine home birth, attended by an unlicensed midwife Roman had insisted on hiring. The midwife had disappeared after Jessica's emergency hospitalization, and Jessica had always suspected Roman had planned the whole thing. The day Roman was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, Fallon and I sat in the courthouse holding hands. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his charm and lies to hide behind. When the judge read the sentence, Roman turned to look at us one last time. But instead of the fear or sadness he probably expected to see, he saw 2 women who had found their strength again. "How do you feel?" I asked Fallon as we walked down the courthouse steps. "Free," she said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." The financial recovery took longer. Roman had spent or hidden most of the money he'd stolen, but Daniel Marcus helped us trace enough assets to recover about $60,000. More importantly, we were able to void all the fraudulent documents Roman had tricked Fallon into signing, including that terrible will and the life insurance policy. Fallon moved back into my house during her final month of pregnancy. At first, she was embarrassed, feeling like she'd failed as an adult by needing to come home. But as the weeks passed, I watched her remember who she was before Roman tried to destroy her sense of self. She started cooking again, something she hadn't done in over a year because Roman had criticized every meal she made. She called her friend Sarah, and they cried together for 3 hours before making plans to have lunch twice a week. She even started playing piano again, filling the house with music for the first time since my husband died. The night Fallon went into labor, she was sitting at the piano playing Chopin when her water broke. We laughed about it later. How different it was from the terrifying home birth Roman had planned. How surrounded by love and medical care she felt at the hospital. Sophie Elizabeth Henderson Castellano was born at 6:43 in the morning on December 15th, weighing 7 pounds and 11 ounces. When the nurse placed her in Fallon's arms for the first time, my daughter looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful, Mom. She's perfect." "Just like her mother," I said, and I meant it. The name question had been a source of stress for Fallon. She didn't want Sophie to carry Roman's name, but legally changing it seemed complicated and expensive. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. What if we made it Henderson Castellano now, and when you're ready, we can just drop the Castellano part? Would you be okay with that? Having Sophie carry Dad's name? Your father would be honored. He always wanted grandchildren. So Sophie became Henderson Castellano, carrying forward the name of the grandfather she'd never meet, but whose love had protected her mother when she needed it most. The healing process wasn't instant or easy. Fallon still had moments of doubt, times when Roman's voice in her head told her she was worthless or incapable, but each day, she got a little stronger. She started taking online classes to update her business degree. She began therapy with a counselor who specialized in domestic abuse recovery. Most importantly, she started trusting her own judgment again. 6 months after Sophie was born, Fallon made a decision that both terrified and thrilled me. She wanted to move out and get her own apartment. "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked, though I was proud of her for wanting to try. "I think so. I need to prove to myself that I can take care of Sophie on my own. Not because someone is forcing me to, but because I choose to." Now, we found her a small 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from my house, close enough for emergency babysitting, far enough for independence. The day she moved in, she called me that evening. "Mom," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I put Sophie in her crib in her own room, and I made myself dinner, and I ate it while watching whatever I wanted on television. And you know what? What? I felt proud. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. That's when I knew she was going to be okay. A year later, Fallon was thriving. She'd gotten a part-time job with a marketing firm that let her work from home 3 days a week. Sophie was walking and babbling and filling our lives with joy. And I had discovered something I'd never expected, that being needed again, being part of my daughter's recovery and my granddaughter's life, had given me a purpose I didn't know I was missing. Elena Rodriguez had her baby too, a healthy boy she named Miguel. She moved back to her family in Texas, and she and Fallon stayed in touch, bonding over their shared experience and their children born just months apart. Sometimes they would video call and let the babies babble at each other through the screen. "Do you think they'll understand someday?" Fallon asked me one evening as we watched Sophie play with her blocks. "What we went through to keep them safe? They'll understand that they were wanted and loved and protected. That's all they need to know." But there was one more surprise waiting for us, one final gift from the investigation into Roman's crimes. A year and a half after his sentencing, Daniel Marcus called with unexpected news. The FBI's investigation had uncovered a hidden account Roman had been using to funnel money from his various schemes. After the victims were compensated for their losses, there was still money left over, money that legally belonged to Fallon as his wife at the time it was stolen. "How much?" I asked. $237,000. When I told Fallon, she sat down heavily in her kitchen chair, staring at me in shock. "That's more than enough for Sophie's college fund," she whispered. "And maybe a down payment on a house. Or maybe some of it could go to helping other women like Elena," I suggested. "Women who are trying to rebuild their lives after men like Roman." Fallon's eyes lit up. "A fund. We could create a fund to help women escape abusive relationships, get legal help, find safe housing." And that's what we did. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation, named after the woman whose courage to come forward had helped bring Roman to justice, now helps dozens of women every year escape situations like the one Fallon had been trapped in. I look at my life now and marvel at how much has changed. My house, which had been so quiet and lonely after my husband's death, is now filled with the sounds of Sophie's laughter and Fallon's piano playing. My days, which had stretched empty before me, are now full of purpose and meaning. Roman thought he could break my daughter, steal her strength, and reduce her to nothing. Instead, he gave her the greatest gift possible, the knowledge of her own resilience. He tried to destroy our family, but he only made us stronger. Sometimes in the evening, when Fallon and Sophie are here for dinner and I'm watching my granddaughter take her first steps between us, I think about that night when I found Fallon on the kitchen floor, how hopeless everything seemed, how powerless I felt. I learned something important during those dark months. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. It's the decision to fight for someone even when they can't fight for themselves. It's the courage to speak truth when lies seem easier. It's the strength to build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. My daughter is free. My granddaughter is safe. Our family is whole again, and Roman Castellano has 15 years in federal prison to think about the woman he underestimated and the family he failed to destroy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let someone else's darkness extinguish your light. Sometimes it's just living well, loving deeply, and building something beautiful from the pieces they tried to break. That's exactly what we did, and we're just getting started. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.